Just after sunrise, a quiet place can become a crime scene. A single clue. A hidden secret. A story someone never wanted the world to know. Welcome to Fatal Crime Investigation, where we uncover the truth behind chilling real-life cases and the secrets buried beneath them. If you're fascinated by real investigations, subscribe and follow every case we uncover. At exactly 2:43 a.m., the lights in the quiet house on Briar Lane were still on. From outside, nothing looked unusual. The curtains were drawn. The front porch was clean. A small garden sat perfectly trimmed beside the walkway. It was the kind of home people passed and thought, a good family lives there. But inside that house, a woman named Clara Bennett was standing barefoot in the kitchen, holding a broken phone in one hand and a bloodstained envelope in the other. She was not crying. Not anymore. Because by that night, Clara had learned something more terrifying than violence. She had learned that the man everyone called a loving husband had been living a second life in the dark. And the worst part was this. Everyone had warned Clara not to embarrass him. Everyone had told her to be grateful. Everyone had believed him. By day, Victor Bennett was perfect. He wore clean suits, opened doors for elderly women, donated to the church, and smiled like a man who had nothing to hide. At community dinners, he placed his hand gently on Clara's shoulder and called her, "My queen." People admired them. They said Clara was lucky. After all, Victor was rich, respected, and powerful. He owned half the properties in the town and had friends in the police department, the council office, and even the courthouse. Clara, on the other hand, came from nothing. She had grown up poor, worked as a cleaner, and still carried herself with quiet humility. To the town, Victor had rescued her. But inside their home, Clara knew the truth. Victor had not rescued her. He had purchased silence. At first, it started small. He corrected the way she spoke, controlled what she wore, checked her phone, mocked her background, made jokes about her poverty in front of guests. Then, behind closed doors, the loving husband disappeared. His voice became cold. His eyes became empty. And every night, Clara felt like she was living with a stranger wearing her husband's face. But no one believed her. When she tried to tell Victor's sister, the woman smiled sadly and said, "Clara, don't destroy a good man because of emotions." When she went to their pastor, he told her marriage required patience. When she went to the police, the officer looked at Victor's name and lowered his voice. "Are you sure you want to make this kind of accusation?" That was the first time Clara understood something painful. Power does not always need to shout. Sometimes power simply makes people look away. For months, Clara became smaller. She stopped visiting friends, stopped laughing loudly, stopped wearing bright colors. Victor called it maturity. But Clara knew it was fear. Then one afternoon, something changed. While cleaning Victor's private study, Clara found a locked drawer slightly open. Inside were photographs. Not family pictures. Not business documents. Photographs of women. Some were smiling. Some looked frightened. Some appeared to be taken without their knowledge. Clara's hands began to shake. Behind the photographs was a brown envelope with 3 words written across it. "Do not open." So Clara opened it. Inside were bank records, hotel receipts, and a list of names. But one name froze her completely. Maya Ellis. Maya had been Clara's childhood friend. 2 years earlier, Maya vanished after leaving work late at night. Victor had attended the prayer gathering. He had held Clara while she cried. He had said, "This world is dangerous." Now Clara was staring at Maya's name inside his drawer. That was the moment the story changed. Because Clara no longer believed she was only trapped in a bad marriage. She believed she was sleeping beside a monster. That night, Clara waited until Victor fell asleep. Then she copied every document she could find. Photographs, receipts, Names. Dates. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the files. But before she could leave the study, Victor's voice came from the doorway. "What are you doing?" Clara turned slowly. Victor stood there in his robe, calm and smiling. Not angry. That was what terrified her most. He walked toward her and gently took the envelope from her hand. Then he whispered, "You really thought you were the first woman to find that?" Clara's blood went cold. Victor leaned closer. "You poor thing. You still don't understand what kind of town this is." The next morning, Clara was arrested. Victor told police she had been unstable for months. He showed them fake medical papers. He told neighbors she had become obsessed with conspiracy theories. He even cried during his statement. And everyone believed him. The town watched as Clara was taken away in handcuffs while Victor stood on the porch, broken and dignified, playing the grieving husband perfectly. For Clara, it was the most disappointing turn of her life. She had found the truth. But the truth had no power. Not yet. For 3 weeks, Clara sat in a holding cell while Victor's lawyers destroyed her character. They called her poor, jealous, uneducated, unstable. The newspapers wrote, "Prominent businessman's wife accused of fabricating criminal claims." Clara became the villain in her own survival story. But what Victor did not know was this. Before he caught her that night, Clara had managed to send one file. Just one. It went to a woman named Detective Rachel Monroe. Rachel was not from Victor's town. She had been investigating Maya Ellis's disappearance for years, quietly, after the original case was closed too quickly. And when Rachel opened Clara's file, she saw the same hotel receipt she had been searching for since Maya vanished. For the first time, Victor Bennett's perfect life had a crack in it. A small one, but enough for light to enter. Detective Monroe visited Clara in jail 2 days later. She did not promise freedom. She did not promise justice. She only placed one photograph on the table. It was Maya. Then she said, "Clara, I need you to be strong. Because I think your husband has done this before." Clara stared at the picture. Her voice broke. "How many women?" Rachel hesitated. That hesitation answered before her words did. "We don't know yet." And that was the major revelation that shattered Clara completely. She had thought she was fighting for herself. But now she understood. She might have been the only survivor close enough to expose him. The woman everyone underestimated had become the one person Victor needed to destroy. Days later, Detective Monroe searched an abandoned storage unit linked to one of Victor's companies. Inside, they found old clothing, missing person flyers, burner phones, and a wall covered in printed images. At the center of the wall was Clara. Not one photo. Dozens. Victor had been watching her long before they met. Their marriage was never love. It was selection. And as Rachel stood in that storage room, one message arrived on her phone. Unknown number. No name. Just 5 words. "You opened the wrong door." At the same time, back at the jail, Clara received a visitor. Victor. He sat across from her, calm as ever. Then he smiled gently and said, "Part of me always liked your courage." Clara said nothing. Victor leaned forward. "But courage does not save women like you." Then he placed something on the table. A photograph. Clara looked down, and her entire body went numb. It was Detective Rachel Monroe, tied to a chair, still alive. Victor whispered, "Now tell me, Clara, do you still want the truth?" The photograph trembled in Clara's hands. It showed Detective Rachel Monroe tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. Her face was bruised, but her eyes were open, alert, defiant. Victor Bennett leaned back calmly across the jail table. He looked like a man discussing weekend plans. Not a man who had just revealed a hostage. "Now," Victor said softly, "let's talk honestly." Clara felt her heart pounding against her ribs. "Where is she?" Clara whispered. Victor smiled slightly. "You're still thinking too small." Clara's voice cracked. "You hurt her because she found the truth." Victor chuckled. "No, Clara. I hurt her because you forced me to." The word stabbed deeper than any threat. Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You see, everything was perfect until you started asking questions." Clara's mind raced. Perfect? How could something so evil ever be perfect? But Victor continued. "For years, I built a system that nobody questioned." He tapped the table slowly with his finger. "Missing women, bad neighborhoods, late-night disappearances." His eyes locked on Clara. "And people always believe the same story." He whispered the words like a teacher explaining a lesson. "Bad things happen to careless women." Clara's stomach twisted. Victor's calmness was more terrifying than rage. This wasn't a man losing control. This was a man who had never believed he could be stopped. Across town, the police station buzzed with activity. Detective Monroe's disappearance had triggered quiet panic. Because when an investigator vanishes, someone powerful is usually involved. But the department was divided. Victor Bennett was wealthy, influential, untouchable. Half the officers believed the situation was a misunderstanding. The other half were afraid to say what they were beginning to suspect. One officer whispered to another, "If Victor Bennett is involved, we're not dealing with a man. We're dealing with a machine." Back in the jail visitor room, Victor studied Clara carefully. "You want to know something interesting?" he said. Clara stared silently. Victor continued. "People think monsters are loud." He leaned closer. "They expect anger, violence, chaos." His smile widened slightly. "But the real monsters..." He paused. "They're organized." Clara felt tears forming in her eyes. But she forced them back. "You think you're untouchable." Victor shook his head slowly. "No." He tapped the photograph again. "I know I am." Clara looked down at the image of Detective Monroe. Rachel's eyes were fierce, even tied up. And suddenly Clara understood something important. Victor had made a mistake. He thought fear would break her. But fear had already broken Clara months ago. What remained now was something else. Resolve. Later that night, Clara sat alone in her cell. She replayed Victor's words over and over. Missing women. Bad neighborhoods. Careless women. Suddenly a pattern formed in her mind. Victor didn't choose victims randomly. He chose women society would not fight for. Women who were poor, lonely, overlooked. Women like Clara. The realization felt like ice sliding down her spine. Victor wasn't just hiding crimes. He was hiding them inside society's indifference. The next morning, Detective Monroe's partner forced open the storage unit again. This time, they searched deeper. Behind a false wall, they discovered a small metal safe. Inside were dozens of memory cards, each one labeled with a date and a woman's name. When the first video played, the room fell silent. The footage showed Victor speaking calmly to a terrified woman. Not shouting, not threatening, talking, convincing, manipulating, promising help. The officer watching whispered quietly, "He doesn't just hunt them. He studies them." Another officer said something even more chilling. "This man thinks he's conducting an experiment." Meanwhile, Victor returned to Clara's cell one last time. His voice was soft, almost kind. "I'm giving you a chance." Clara didn't respond. Victor placed another photograph on the table. Rachel Monroe again. But this time something had changed. The room behind her looked darker. and a timer appeared on a small digital screen beside her. Victor spoke slowly. "You tell the police everything you found." Clara's eyes widened. Victor nodded. "Yes, everything." Clara's voice trembled. "You want me to expose you?" Victor smiled. "That's the beauty of it." He leaned forward. "Because when people hear the truth, they will never believe it." Clara's stomach dropped. Victor continued calmly. "You think society wants to accept that someone like me could exist?" He gestured to himself. "Successful. Educated. Admired." "No." Victor whispered. "They will choose the story that lets them sleep at night." Clara realized what he meant. People prefer comfortable lies, even when the truth screams. But what Victor didn't know was this. While he spoke, a small camera hidden in the visitor room recorded every word. Detective Monroe's partner had placed it there hours earlier. Victor Bennett had finally said too much. And for the first time, the machine was cracking. Hours later, police stormed an abandoned warehouse outside town. Inside, they found Detective Monroe alive. Weak, but breathing. She looked at the officers and whispered something haunting. "You're too late." They rushed her outside. "What do you mean too late?" Rachel looked toward the city skyline. Then she said the words that froze everyone. Victor Bennett was never working alone. Back at the jail, officers rushed to Victor's cell. But the door was open. Victor Bennett was gone. No forced entry. No broken locks. Just one note left behind on the metal bed. 4 words written neatly. "You still don't understand." Hours later, Detective Monroe finally watched the videos from the storage unit. But one file stood out. It was older. Much older. The date shocked her. 23 years earlier. Before Victor Bennett became rich. Before he married Clara. Before the disappearances started. The video opened with a young Victor sitting beside another man. A man older. Calm. Cold. Teaching. Rachel's heart sank. Victor wasn't the beginning. He was the student. And as the screen froze on the older man's face, Rachel whispered something that made the entire room fall silent. That man, she swallowed slowly, was the police chief. The horrifying truth finally became clear. Victor Bennett was never the monster. He was simply the one who continued the work. A legacy hidden inside power. Protected by silence. Fed by society's willingness to look away. And somewhere, far outside the city, Victor Bennett drove down an empty highway. Smiling. Because he knew something Clara was only beginning to understand. Stopping one monster does not end the nightmare. When the nightmare was built by the system itself,